It's so interesting.
It's so interesting.
It's so interesting. It's interesting.
Welcome to It's So Interesting, where people talk about their work and life experience. I am George Spitzer. Today I'm talking with Marianne Livingston, who is an author and a teacher. Okay, let's get right to it.
Yes, well, this first book is called Find Your Voice and Take the Lead. And it's aimed at high school students, or it's written for high school students. One of the reasons for writing this book is that I really feel that everybody has the ability to be able to stand up and speak out and talk about what matters to them. And yet many people, in fact, there's a large percentage of people who are afraid of public speaking. I think the sooner people can learn that, I mean, it's ideal if they could learn it when they're 5 or 6 years old. Certainly by the time you're in high school, which this book is written for high school students, there are going to be a series of books, but this particular one is aimed on helping high school students talk about something they really care about and believe should be changed. So it's learning how to be an advocate and also learning how to write a persuasive speech.
It has nothing to do with the scenarios we've seen in the movie of My Fair Lady, where it's all phonetics and clarity. You are dealing a different aspect of speaking, right? Yes,
exactly. That's a very good question, because so many courses in public speaking try to teach people sort of from the outside in, so that you're learning techniques. My belief is that people really speak better when they speak from their heart and what they care about. So there are two reasons for that. I mean, when I've talked with people even corporate executives, many of them were excellent speakers, but there are some who'd come up through the through the financial side or the operations side, and they were great talking to a small group of people, but not to a big audience. And so, helping people overcome their fear of public speaking, one of the key points is it's easier if you care about what you're talking about.
Doesn't organization and preparation have anything to do with it too?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. The first thing I like to start with getting them to talk about something they care about. So they get up and stand up and talk about, their favorite movie. It could be, something that matters to them. And that's just to overcome any of those fears, and also to help them focus on something they're going to want to talk about with passion. I mean, I don't like that word actually, but with the sort of the strength, and put a lot of heart into it. So that part is really important, and equally important, which is a part that's often left out, is how important the audience is. Because I want them, and today it seems to me that there's so much controversy, especially in the political world, and so much polarization and partisanship, that people just say what they think, and to heck with the audience. And so one of the things that is central to the way I teach is, and I call it the litmus test, is whenever you're going to give a speech or a presentation, what is it that you want the audience to do or think differently because you talk to them? In other words, if you're giving a speech and there's nothing that you want them to do or think differently, then maybe you don't need to give the speech. Basically, so you look at that, and it can be just to have a lot of information that they didn't have before. First book in this course, you're aimed at trying to persuade people to think differently about a subject, things they may never have thought of. Also to take action. And to do that, I don't know too many people who raise their hand and say, yes, when people are really rude to me and tell me that I'm completely wrong and they're completely right, that really persuades me to go along with them. I mean, almost nobody reacts well to this kind of in-your-face partisanship.
So that's why you call your book Find Your Voice and Take the Lead.
Exactly. So they've got to find their voice, their heart. They have to think about the audience. Then the next part, which is, you point out, the message. They have to structure that message really carefully. They don't have long. I have them do it in 4 to 6 minutes. But the people say, that's not long. You go, the Gettysburg Address was under 3 minutes. And I think we still pay attention to it. So being concise, and having it structured is really, really important. And there's a certain way to structure a persuasive speech. So you grab your audience, and then you take them step by step through your thinking, or through your logic, or through your persuasive arguments, until you end with a dramatic closing.
You're saying that quality does not equal length.
Exactly. Well, I mean, there are people, I have to say this, who are just such good speakers. For example, Bill Clinton, that you can just listen to them and they can go on. But often they could have said it more briefly.
You mentioned Bill Clinton, whom I've heard, of course, too. In our contemporary era, do you consider to be the top 5 public English-speaking speakers right now?
You know, it's sort of hard to have to think about that, but certainly Bill Clinton would be right there. Because basically, when you're in his presence, he has something that you certainly try to help people develop. Everybody can't develop that, but he has this amazing connection to the audience. I mean, when you're in his presence, you feel like that every single person feels like he's talking directly to them. It's just rather magical.
Who else besides Bill Clinton?
I would definitely put our president, Barack Obama, as an amazing speaker, and it's just a very different style. And this, you know, when you're talking about find your voice, this is what I'm trying to emphasize with the students, or with executives too. I'm not trying to get Barack Obama trying to give a Bill Clinton speech. It would sound terrible. And actually, Bill Clinton wouldn't sound good doing a Barack Obama speech. They each have their own voice. And it's totally, you know who that is. I think that they're a perfect example. Other people who I think...
What about other people you have known that are not necessarily public speakers, I mean, that have spoken well, especially corporate executives? Are there a few you could mention?
Yes, absolutely. I have to say that when we go back to thinking about my work at Avon Products, I have to say, because they had so many different people and levels, speaking was so important, communication so important when you have a large sales force. I have to say that when I was there, he was the president of Avon Products, and then he became the CEO. Jim Preston was one of the best public speakers I've ever heard. Mm-hmm. He actually, he could read a laundry list, and you would be rather fascinated, because he just had that ability to connect with the audience the way Bill Clinton did. I mean, he's a very different kind of public speaker. So I actually was, to me, so fortunate to work with him. And there were 3 other people there who he was the kind of person that just the whole audience would want to end up doing exactly what he wanted them to do, because you felt like he really cared about you. Another one who was there at that time, and just using them because I worked so closely with them, was Marcia Worthing, who was head of all the human resources globally. She was a very different kind of speaker, very incisive, and had such a sharp mind. She didn't do all that much public speaking, but she presented speeches.
What about past people who are no longer with us? I had a list, I would think, with people like Lincoln and Roosevelt. What are some of the people that you think are models for your students to study?
That's a really good point, because I do sequences, because I like to do sequences. I definitely have people work on past speakers. One of the suggestions I do is to have people read Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, and the Barack Obama's speech on race. They sort of interestingly follow each other. For great speakers, and we do focus on the first part of this book is on leadership and what it takes to be a great leader in the communication piece. Very often, great speakers refer to the past in order to build on what they're saying now. And so when Lincoln, with his Gettysburg Address, goes back to the forefathers, and he's trying to bring people together who are pretty angry at each other to build the future. Then Dr. King, is standing, I say to them, you don't very often get to have that kind of setting, with Lincoln behind you, and George Washington in front of you. But then he brings up Lincoln, and we've moved much, much further in the race issue. And then Barack Obama, in his speech on race, refers back to it. And I don't know that speech as well, even though I have the students use it. But I try to pick speeches from the past that actually will teach different points I want to get across. And, of course, Dr. King's is amazing, because one of the points I always make is being positive and looking for a solution. And I often say, now, how do you think we'd feel about that speech if he had said, I have a nightmare, instead of I have a dream? Mm-hmm. And I said, he does talk about the nightmare in the beginning of what it's like. But then he takes us to where the dream is, and I really want to focus on them being solution-oriented, not sticking back in the nightmare, because if you just make us feel bad, we're not going to do anything about it. We'll just feel bad. But if you can take us forward to what the world could be like if we actually help implement the changes you're suggesting. I have to say, they're both sides. John Kennedy, some of his speeches are amazing. And they're so literate. And they're so brilliant that way. Different party, different person. Ronald Reagan's speeches are amazing for storytelling. He's one of the first presidents that started bringing in stories of just the average person. I mean, I have them do a couple of his speeches because it's a different rhythm. One of the parts of finding your own voice, too, it's really important for students to get in touch with their own rhythm. First day of class, in fact, I have them actually answer a little questionnaire, and actually it'd be very fun. I was thinking for us to all do that. And the questionnaire has all kinds of things, like if you could change one thing about the world, what would it be? It can vary. Teachers could add to it or subtract from it. But then I get them up, stand up and say that. And I really listen to find out, okay, what about this person is just so unique and really them? Just one quality. And then I also think in what one thing could maybe improve upon. And that's usually technique. So the one quality, for example, that one student stood up with the other day, quiet she had, and it's just, but amazing twinkle, amazing sense of humor, just combined with sincerity. She needed to be able to speak louder, the one thing she needed to improve, because we couldn't hear her. But she had this sense of conviction that shone through.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit, because we've been talking about well-known people and established famous speakers and so forth. We're going to something closer to your home, which are your students, oftentimes middle or high school students. I'll ask this question to start. Is there a student that's unteachable?
No, there absolutely isn't. Because it's like infinity, there's always the next resisted. That didn't mean they couldn't be taught. It meant that they weren't particularly interested in doing this. I would say one of the main things is, if you're going to practice this, you do have to be interested in it.
Well, by a student learning how to find their voice and taking the lead, does it become a differentiating factor in their life for their benefit? Or no difference?
She actually won the competition. She just blew everybody away when she got up there. She really, really worked at it. Saw her the other day at school. She's now a senior, and she said, gosh, now they're asking me to speak all the time. And she said to me, and I have it somewhere, that, it did definitely change her life. I mean, she sees herself differently. She knows that it's okay to be yourself on stage. And see, that's what, whether it's a corporate executive, my job is to get people up on stage and have them, A, be themselves, and I always like to add in B, be wonderful. The being yourself is wonderful. And that definitely has changed her. And we have other students as well.
Oh, I'd like to hear about some of those other students, because since you've been teaching for so many years, it hasn't been decades now?
No, it hasn't been decades. No, I've only not been teaching, but about 7 years.
Okay. In 7 years, being that you've been teaching middle and high school students...
That's usually high school.
High school, excuse me. You probably have heard of their subsequent success?
Yes, definitely.
Give me some examples.
Well, one student, and I don't want to take... although she gives me a lot of credit, because I worked with her before I developed the whole course, and so this was before 7 years ago, and she was, I was actually helping the teacher who was doing a debate course, and helping the students taking these same principles and working with them, but it hadn't developed into a whole course yet. There were 3 or 4 students in that group that I sort of really related to really well, and so all the way through school, I worked with them, and I got a call from her senior year saying that she'd been asked by Mia Villaraigosa to give the keynote speech at his environmental conference for Los Angeles for all the youth. And I'll have to look the numbers back up, but there were thousands and thousands of kids, and it was in a huge venue. And so she asked me to work with her on it. And so we came in, we worked on all the different parts. She already was such a good presenter. That had been being worked out over the years, and I really don't want to take so much credit for that, but because the school gave her an opportunity to present. I helped her work on the message and, worked on the speaking skills too. She was wonderful.
Your book is actually a workbook, I believe, a book that you teach as a course book. It's structured for teachers and students combined, obviously, to actually, at the end of the course, which is, what, a 15-day course or a 15 chapter? I mean, how is this thing structured?
Well, it can be structured to fit into the teacher's schedule. And so there are two different ways, really, to use it. One is to use the course, as I do, as an after-school workshop that I'm able to give. And so you can have that either twice a week or once a week, whatever fits the after-school plan of the school you're working with.
For how long?
And so it's 15 sessions, and that could go once a week during the semester, and it can be 1 hour, 2 hours. It depends on how much, and really can be structured the way the teacher wants to structure it, and how much work can be, is to be done in class. For instance, I've given this course in Boston, and I've given it to a group of students who are called the Honan Fellows, who've been hand-picked leaders, and they have a special program that's in affiliation with the Weston House Boys and Girls Club in Allston, Massachusetts. Basically that I've done where it's the same amount of hours, but it's maybe 5 3-hour sessions. I mean, depending on how it works. And a lot of that depends on, whether you're doing it, as I said, an after-school program, or whether you're doing it as workshops, like for the Boys and Girls Club or for any of the other different student organizations.
This book is out. I presume it's doing pretty well. Wrote this book on your own, or do you have any collaborators? Because this takes quite a bit of work.
Teacher Donald Sterrett, who actually is one of his best. He's one of his focuses in teaching is to have his kids learn to present, have them learn to organize their thoughts, have them learn to. He's a history teacher of AP European History and World History at the Environmental Charter High School in Lawndale, California. And it's a very creative school, and his approach to teaching history includes a lot of presenting. And so I was talking to him about this course, which was just an inception that I had done in Boston, and he worked with me to help me turn it into a course that would fit into the high school curriculum.
That sounds fascinating and very hands-on, so it can be usable by a large group of... It sounds like if you're focusing in this book on high school students, there are other groups of people that can benefit from your course. Are you thinking of other groups of people?
I've had a few students, for instance, who were special ed students, and so I'm thinking of doing a version of this with a special ed professional.
That must be a huge market, because there's probably no such book available.
It doesn't seem to be, and this teacher was saying she'd seen from my work firsthand the benefits on the students of learning to think about breaking a lot of limitations if you can have the opportunity to really write about something you care about and want to change and have an audience for it.
Another group would be, I would imagine, like ESL.
That's another group I'm really thinking about and talking to somebody who specializes in that area, because an early student I had too, when I was working, actually again in a bigger group, I was taking my program and putting it into a bigger group. That was a group of seniors. They had to do a senior presentation. And the first day, one of the students, very lovely young lady, couldn't stand up. She said, I can't do it. I almost started to weep, and I just quietly said, yes, you can. You can stand up and tell us.
The little engine that could.
Well, you can stand up. You can tell us. And so she stood up and very rapidly said it. But she'd only been in this country for a couple of years. Her English, she didn't feel was very good. But what her topic was, why we need better ESL programs in California. Well, by the end of the course, and this was not just me, there were other people that worked with her too, because it's a big program, so people are working with different aspects of it. But I have to say, she got a standing ovation. She was one of the favorite students. She was absolutely at ease. And because this was something so important to her, the importance of what she had to say overcame the fear.
And that's what you're all about.
And that's what you're all about, exactly.
Well, I've been talking with Marianne Livingston. Thank you for being here, Marianne. If you would like to contact Marianne or listen again to this show or any other show, go to itssointeresting.com.
It's so interesting.
It's so interesting.
So
It's so
interesting.
interesting.
It's interesting.